My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 28, and on what should have been the happiest day of my life, my sister destroyed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Standing there in her bridesmaid dress, mascara perfectly intact, while mine ran down my cheeks, she smiled that cold smile I'd seen 1,000 times but never understood until that moment. "I'm taking the car his parents gave you," she said, dangling the keys to my Honda Civic like a trophy. What I discovered next about my family's betrayal would shatter every assumption I'd ever made about blood being thicker than water, and the revenge I'd eventually serve would be sweeter than my wedding cake ever could have been. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family drama that literally unfolded at my own wedding, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, you know how deep these wounds can cut. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious family karma, and don't forget to subscribe because this story has twists that'll make your jaw drop. Trust me, you'll want to see how this wedding day nightmare turns into the most satisfying revenge story ever. Growing up as the younger sister in the Morgan household meant living in Emma's shadow, though I never minded it much. Emma was 3 years older, effortlessly beautiful with her platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that could charm anyone into doing exactly what she wanted. She was the golden child who never got in trouble, the one who brought home perfect report cards and dated the quarterback. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, studious brunette who preferred books to parties and barely spoke above a whisper until I turned 18. Our parents, David and Margaret Morgan, owned a successful accounting firm in suburban Connecticut. They'd built their lives around appearances: the perfect house with the white picket fence, the country club memberships, the annual family photos where we all wore coordinating outfits and forced smiles. Emma fits seamlessly into this picture-perfect narrative. I was always the awkward piece that didn't quite belong, but I tried my best to play my part. Emma had a gift for making people believe she was genuinely caring and supportive. She'd remember your birthday, bring you soup when you were sick, and offer the most thoughtful advice when you were struggling. What I didn't realize until much later was that every kind gesture came with invisible strings attached. Every favor was recorded in her mental ledger, waiting to be called in when she needed something from you. When I started dating Mark Rodriguez during my junior year of college, Emma was the first person I told. She squealed with excitement, demanded to see photos, and insisted on meeting him the next time I came home. Mark was everything I'd never thought I deserved. Kind, funny, ambitious, and completely devoted to me. He was studying engineering while I pursued my master's degree in library science. We were both quiet, thoughtful people who preferred deep conversations to small talk, and we complemented each other perfectly. Emma loved Mark immediately, or at least she appeared to. She'd invite him to family dinners, text him funny memes, and treat him like the brother she'd never had. When Mark's parents visited from California for the first time, Emma went out of her way to make them feel welcome, cooking their favorite Mexican dishes and asking about their culture with what seemed like genuine interest. I was so grateful to have a sister who embraced the man I loved and made him feel like part of our family. The engagement happened on a crisp October evening 2 years later. Mark had planned the most romantic proposal at the local botanical garden where we'd had our first official date. He'd coordinated with the staff to have the entire rose garden lit with fairy lights, and when I said yes through happy tears, Emma was the first person I called. She screamed so loudly with joy that Mark could hear her from across the room, and she immediately started planning engagement party details before I'd even had a chance to really look at my ring. Planning the wedding became Emma's unofficial second job. She had opinions about everything: the venue, the flowers, the menu, even my dress. Initially, I appreciated her enthusiasm and input. She had better taste than I did, and she seemed to genuinely want my day to be perfect. She helped me narrow down venues, accompanied me to dress fittings, and spent hours researching photographers and caterers. When I felt overwhelmed by all the decisions, Emma would step in and handle things, telling me not to worry about the details. Mark's parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, were incredibly generous throughout the engagement period. They treated me like a daughter from the moment Mark brought me home to meet them. When they learned that my parents were struggling financially due to some bad business investments, Maria and Carlos quietly offered to help with wedding expenses. They paid for the flowers, the photographer, and even bought me a reliable used car so I wouldn't have to take the bus to work anymore. The Honda Civic wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and it represented their acceptance of me into their family. Emma seemed thrilled about Mark's parents' generosity, constantly praising how lucky I was to be marrying into such a wonderful family. She'd make comments about how Maria treated me better than our own mother sometimes and how Carlos was the father figure she wished she'd had. At the time, I thought she was just being supportive and maybe a little envious of the warmth Mark's family showed me. The warning signs were there, but I was too trusting, too grateful for Emma's help to see them clearly. She'd sometimes make subtle comments about how Mark could do better, or how his parents probably expected him to marry someone from their own culture. When I'd get upset, she'd quickly backtrack and claim she was just playing devil's advocate or trying to prepare me for potential challenges. She'd hug me and tell me how much she loved us together, and I'd feel foolish for doubting her intentions. Looking back, I can see how carefully Emma orchestrated every interaction, every conversation. She was gathering information, building relationships, and positioning herself strategically in every important relationship in my life. But on the surface, she was the perfect sister, supportive, involved, and genuinely excited about my happiness. I trusted her completely, never imagining that the person who claimed to love me most was secretly planning to take everything that mattered to me. The first real crack in my perfect family illusion appeared 3 months before the wedding, during what should have been a routine bridesmaid dress fitting. Emma had insisted on being my maid of honor, and she'd chosen a beautiful navy blue dress that complemented her coloring perfectly. We were at the boutique with my 2 college friends, Sarah and Jessica, having what I thought was a lovely afternoon until the seamstress stepped away to grab some pins. "You know," Emma said, examining herself in the 3-way mirror, "I think Mark's parents like me better than they like you." She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather, but there was something sharp underneath her tone that made my stomach drop. Sarah and Jessica exchanged uncomfortable glances while I forced a laugh. "That's ridiculous, Em. They love me." "Oh, I'm sure they love you," Emma continued, smoothing the fabric over her hips. "But love and like are different things, aren't they?" When we had dinner last week, Maria spent the entire time asking me about my job, my interests, my opinions on everything. She barely spoke to you except to ask you to pass the salt. The memory of that dinner came flooding back, and I realized Emma was right. Maria had been unusually quiet with me, and she had seemed more engaged with Emma's stories about her marketing job and her thoughts on politics and current events. I'd attributed it to Maria being tired from a long week, but now Emma was making me question everything. "Maybe she was just being polite," I said weakly, but doubt was already creeping in. Maybe Emma shrugged, but her smile suggested she didn't believe it any more than I did. "Or maybe she's realizing that you and Mark are pretty different people. You know, culturally speaking." Jessica stepped forward, her expression troubled. "Emma, that seems like a pretty hurtful thing to say." "I'm not trying to be hurtful," Emma replied, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm just being realistic. Rachel deserves to know if Mark's family has reservations about the marriage. I'd rather hurt her feelings a little bit now than watch her get blindsided later." The seamstress returned, and Emma immediately switched back to being the cheerful, supportive sister, gushing over how beautiful I looked in my wedding dress and making jokes about how jealous all my other friends were going to be. But the damage was done. Her words had planted seeds of insecurity that I couldn't shake. Over the following weeks, I found myself analyzing every interaction with Mark's family. When Carlos was quiet during a family dinner, I wondered if he was having second thoughts about me. When Maria forgot to call me back one day, I assumed it meant she was distancing herself. Emma was always there to validate my concerns, offering a sympathetic ear and reasonable explanations that somehow made me feel worse instead of better. "I think you might be overthinking this," Mark said one evening when I brought up my concerns about his parents. We were sitting on my couch, takeout containers spread across the coffee table, planning seating arrangements for the reception. But what if Emma's right? What if they think I'm not good enough for you? Mark set down his pen and turned to face me fully. Rachel, my parents adore you. My mom calls you Misha now. She's never done that with any of my previous girlfriends. My dad asks about you every time I call home. Where is this coming from? Emma just mentioned that your mom seems more comfortable talking to her than to me, and I started noticing. Wait, Mark interrupted, his expression shifting. Emma said that, when at the dress fitting, she was just being honest about what she observed. Mark was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him processing something that troubled him. Rachel, can I ask you something? Have you noticed that Emma always seems to be around when my parents visit? Like, even when it's supposed to be just family time? I thought about it and realized he was right. Emma had been present at almost every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual visit. She'd either been invited by my parents or she'd just shown up, always with a good excuse and a bright smile. She's just being friendly, I said, but even as I said it, I felt uncertain. Last week, when my mom was helping you with the wedding planning, Emma cornered my dad in the kitchen for like 30 minutes. When I went to check on them, they stopped talking immediately. It was weird. What do you think they were talking about? I don't know, but my dad seemed uncomfortable. And later that night, my mom asked me if I was really sure about getting married so young. She'd never expressed any concerns before that conversation. A chill ran down my spine. What did you tell her? I told her I was absolutely sure and that I couldn't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. But Rachel, it was strange. It was like someone had planted doubt in her mind. We stared at each other in the dim lighting of my apartment, both of us starting to piece together a puzzle we didn't want to complete. The idea that Emma might be deliberately undermining my relationship was so devastating that I couldn't even voice it out loud. I'm probably just being paranoid, I said finally. Wedding stress makes people crazy, right? Mark pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head. You're not crazy, but maybe we should be more careful about who we share our private thoughts and concerns with. That night, I lay awake thinking about every conversation Emma and I had shared about Mark and his family. I remembered how she'd encouraged me to voice my insecurities, how she'd offered to talk to Maria when I was worried about being accepted, how she'd volunteered to help with family visits and special occasions. I'd thought she was being the perfect supportive sister, but what if she'd been gathering ammunition instead? The next morning, I decided to test my suspicions. I called Emma and told her that Mark and I had gotten into a fight about the honeymoon plans, which was completely untrue. Within an hour, she'd texted Mark expressing concern and offering to mediate. When Mark showed me the text, we both felt sick. She's trying to position herself as the solution to problems in our relationship, Mark said quietly. Even problems that don't exist. But why would she do that? She's my sister. She loves me. Mark took my hands in his and looked directly into my eyes. I think Emma loves the idea of being needed more than she actually loves you. And I think she's threatened by the idea of you having a life that doesn't revolve around her. It was a painful realization, but it explained so much about our dynamic over the years. Emma had always been the center of attention, the one everyone turned to for advice and support. My relationship with Mark represented a shift in that dynamic, and Emma was fighting to maintain her position of importance in my life. We decided to keep our suspicions to ourselves and see what else we could uncover. We started paying closer attention to Emma's behavior, documenting conversations and noting patterns. What we discovered over the next few weeks was a systematic campaign to undermine my confidence and create division between Mark and his family. Emma was playing a long game, and we were just beginning to understand the rules. The morning of my wedding dawned crisp and clear, exactly the kind of October day I'd always dreamed of for my special moment. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by my bridesmaids who'd stayed over for the traditional pre-wedding sleepover. Emma had insisted on orchestrating the entire morning, from the mimosas and croissants she'd ordered from the fancy bakery downtown to the playlist of uplifting songs that filled the house with energy and excitement. Everything seemed perfect as we went through the familiar rituals of getting ready. The hairstylist arrived on schedule, transforming my usually straight brown hair into an elegant updo with delicate braids and small white flowers woven throughout. The makeup artist worked magic on my face, enhancing my features while keeping everything natural and glowing. Emma documented every moment with her phone, chattering excitedly about how stunning I looked and how jealous all the wedding guests were going to be. "You look like a princess," she gushed, adjusting the delicate pearl earrings that had belonged to our grandmother. "Mark is going to absolutely lose his mind when he sees you walking down that aisle." I should have been blissfully happy, but there was a nagging anxiety in the pit of my stomach that I couldn't shake. Over the past few weeks, Mark and I had continued to notice Emma's subtle manipulations, and we'd started to worry about what she might be planning. We'd decided to proceed with the wedding as planned while keeping our guard up, but now that the day was actually here, I felt like I was walking into a trap. The photographer arrived to capture getting ready photos, and Emma immediately took charge of directing the shots. She positioned herself prominently in every frame, her radiant smile and confident posture making her appear more like the bride than the maid of honor. When the photographer suggested some solo shots of me with my dress, Emma hovered nearby, offering constant commentary and suggestions. "Make sure you get her good side," Emma instructed the photographer. "Rachel can be a little camera shy, so you might need to coach her through the poses." It was a small thing, but it stung. Emma knew I wasn't comfortable being the center of attention, and instead of being supportive, she was highlighting my insecurities in front of strangers. Sarah caught my eye and gave me an encouraging smile, but I could see the concern in her expression. As we prepared to head to the church, Emma pulled me aside for a private moment. "I have something special for you," she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small wrapped box. "It's yours, something new." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a key. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched despite my complicated feelings about Emma. "What does the key represent?" "New beginnings," Emma said, fastening it around my wrist, "and the key to happiness in your marriage." She hugged me tightly, and for a moment I felt like I had my loving sister back. "I'm so proud of you, Rachel. You deserve all the happiness in the world." The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed it would be. Mark looked devastatingly handsome in his navy blue suit, and when I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, his face lit up with pure joy and love. We'd written our own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the church when Mark promised to be my best friend, my biggest supporter, and my partner in all of life's adventures. Emma stood beside me throughout the ceremony, holding my bouquet and adjusting my train when necessary. She smiled warmly at all the right moments, and even teared up during the vow exchange. To any outside observer, she was the picture of a devoted sister celebrating her siblings' happiness. The reception was held at a beautiful historic mansion about 20 minutes from the church. Mark's parents had outdone themselves with the decorations, creating a romantic atmosphere with fairy lights, white roses, and elegant candles that cast a warm glow over everything. The cocktail hour was filled with laughter and congratulations, and I actually started to relax and enjoy my wedding day. This is where everything started to fall apart, and honestly, I need to pause for just a second because even now, thinking about what happened next makes my heart race. If you've ever had someone you trusted completely betray you at your most vulnerable moment, you know that feeling I'm about to describe. Before we get to the moment that changed everything, let me know in the comments if you've ever had a gut feeling about someone that you ignored because you wanted to believe the best in them. Sometimes our instincts try to protect us, but we don't always listen, do we? Stick with me because this is where my wedding day goes from dream to nightmare in the span of about 5 minutes. During dinner, I noticed Emma spending an unusual amount of time talking to Mark's parents. She was seated at the family table directly across from Maria and Carlos, and she seemed to be having intense, quiet conversations with them throughout the meal. Whenever I tried to join in or catch snippets of what they were discussing, Emma would smoothly change the subject to something light and wedding appropriate. "They're probably just getting to know each other better," Mark whispered when I mentioned my observation. "Try not to worry about it tonight. This is our day." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emma's body language was different, more animated and urgent than usual. And Maria and Carlos kept glancing at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. It wasn't disapproval exactly, but it wasn't the warm acceptance I'd grown accustomed to either. After dinner, as guests mingled and the DJ prepared for the dancing portion of the evening, Emma approached me near the gift table. She was carrying a small silver gift bag and wearing that bright smile that I'd learned to distrust. "I have one more surprise for you," she said, her voice sing-song with excitement. "But this one's a little different." "Emma, you've already done so much," I started, but she interrupted me. "No, this is important. This is about your future happiness and security." She reached into the gift bag and pulled out a set of car keys. My car keys, the keys to the Honda Civic that Mark's parents had given me as an engagement gift. "I don't understand," I said, confusion replacing my initial gratitude. "Why do you have my car keys?" "Because I'm taking the car," Emma said, simply, her smile never wavering. "Mark's parents gave it to you, but they've realized they made a mistake. They think it would be better if someone more responsible had it." The world seemed to tilt around me. "What are you talking about? That's my car. Maria and Carlos gave it to me because they wanted me to have reliable transportation." "Actually," Emma said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone, "they gave it to you because they felt sorry for you. But after getting to know our family better, they've realized that charity isn't what you need. What you need is to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." I stared at her in disbelief, my mind struggling to process what she was saying. "Emma, this is my wedding day." "What are you doing?" "I'm helping you," she said, and the sincerity in her voice was almost worse than outright cruelty would have been. "Maria and Carlos have been talking to me about their concerns regarding your marriage to Mark. They love you, but they're worried that you're too dependent, too needy. They think that taking away some of the things they've given you might help you develop more independence and self-reliance." "That's not true," I said, but my voice came out weak and uncertain. "They wouldn't say those things. They love me like a daughter." "They do love you," Emma agreed. "But love sometimes means making tough decisions. They asked me to handle this because they didn't want to hurt your feelings directly. They thought it would be easier coming from family." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Emma had positioned herself as the messenger, the reluctant bearer of bad news who was just looking out for everyone's best interests. She'd found a way to deliver a devastating blow while maintaining plausible deniability and even making herself appear sympathetic. "I'm taking the car tonight," Emma continued, tucking the keys back into her purse. "Don't worry about how you'll get to the honeymoon hotel. I've already arranged for a taxi. Consider it my wedding gift to your new independence." "Emma, please," I whispered, tears starting to blur my vision. "Don't do this." "Not today." "I know it's hard," she said, reaching out to squeeze my arm in what probably looked like a comforting gesture to anyone watching. "But sometimes the people who love us most have to be the ones to deliver difficult truths. Mark's parents are good people and they want what's best for you. This is what's best." I looked around the reception, searching for Mark or his parents, anyone who could confirm or deny what Emma was telling me. But Mark was across the room talking to his college friends, and Maria and Carlos were nowhere to be seen. I was alone with Emma and her devastating revelation, trapped in my wedding dress with nowhere to run and no way to escape the nightmare my perfect day had become. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and satisfied flash across her features before the concerned sister expression returned. "Because someone needs to protect you from your own naivety," she said. "And someone needs to protect Mark's family from making decisions they'll regret later." In that moment, I understood that everything Mark and I had suspected was true. Emma hadn't been trying to help me or protect me. She'd been systematically working to undermine my relationship and turn Mark's family against me. The car was just the beginning. This was her declaration of war, delivered at the moment when I was most vulnerable and least able to fight back. As I stood there in my beautiful wedding dress, surrounded by the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my life, I made a promise to myself. Emma might have won this battle, but the war was far from over. She'd taught me a valuable lesson about family loyalty and trust, and I was about to become a very dedicated student of revenge. The honeymoon in Costa Rica was supposed to be a blissful escape, but I spent most of it obsessing over Emma's betrayal and trying to understand how deep her manipulation ran. Mark was incredibly supportive, holding me while I cried and helping me process the shock of what had happened. We decided to cut our trip short by 2 days so we could return home and start investigating exactly what Emma had told his parents. The conversation with Maria and Carlos happened 3 days after we got back. Mark arranged for us to meet at their house for dinner, just the four of us, so we could discuss what had transpired at the wedding without any outside interference. I was nervous about confronting them, worried that Emma might have been telling the truth about their concerns regarding my character and our marriage. Mija Maria said, "As soon as we sat down, we need to talk about what happened at your wedding. We are so confused and upset." "You're confused?" I asked, surprised by her tone. "But didn't you ask Emma to take my car back because you thought I was too dependent?" Carlos and Maria exchanged bewildered glances. "What are you talking about?" Carlos said. "We never asked anyone to take anything back. That car was our gift to you, no strings attached." Relief flooded through me so intensely that I started crying again. "But Emma said you had concerns about my independence, and that you thought charity wasn't what I needed." "Rachel," Maria said, moving to sit beside me on the couch, "we have never said anything like that to Emma, or to anyone else. We love you, exactly as you are. You're not dependent or needy, you're thoughtful and careful, which are wonderful qualities." Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mom, Dad, what exactly did Emma talk to you about at the wedding? We noticed you having long conversations with her." "She told us some very disturbing things," Carlos said, his voice heavy with regret. "She said that you, Mark, had been expressing doubts about the marriage privately. She claimed that you felt pressured into proposing because Rachel was becoming too clingy and emotional." She said, what Mark's voice was sharp with anger. "She also told us that Rachel had been making negative comments about our family and our traditions," Maria continued. "She said Rachel felt like we were too involved in your relationship and that she wished we would back off and let you two figure things out on your own." I felt sick to my stomach. "I never said any of those things. I love your involvement in our lives. You make me feel like I finally have a real family." "We know that now," Carlos said. "But at the wedding, we didn't know what to think. Emma seemed so sincere, and she claimed she was only telling us these things because she was worried about everyone getting hurt. She played us all against each other," Mark realized. "She told Rachel that you had concerns about her, and she told you that Rachel had complaints about you. She was trying to create division and mistrust." Maria shook her head in disgust. "That girl is very sick to do such things on your wedding day." "But why would she want to hurt her own sister?" That was the question I couldn't answer, at least not completely. But over the following weeks, as Mark and I began investigating Emma's behavior more thoroughly, a pattern started to emerge. We talked to mutual friends, reviewed old text messages and emails, and even reached out to some of Emma's ex-boyfriends to get their perspectives on her character. What we discovered was disturbing. Emma had a history of sabotaging relationships when she felt threatened or excluded. In high school, she'd spread rumors about her best friend's boyfriend that led to their breakup, all because she felt like the friend was spending too much time with him. In college, she'd convinced her roommate's parents that the roommate was doing drugs and failing classes, which resulted in the girl being pulled out of school midway through the semester. Sarah, who had known both of us since college, admitted that she'd always found Emma's behavior troubling but had never felt comfortable saying anything. "She has this way of making everything seem like she's just looking out for people," Sarah explained during a long phone conversation, "but there's always something calculating underneath it. I used to worry about how she affected your self-confidence." Jessica confirmed similar observations. "Remember when you were thinking about applying for that graduate program at Columbia? Emma spent weeks telling you all the reasons why you probably wouldn't get in and how competitive it was. She convinced you not to apply, and then you found out later that several people with lower GPAs than you had been accepted." I did remember that. Emma had seemed so concerned about me setting myself up for disappointment that I'd talked myself out of pursuing something I'd really wanted. At the time, I'd been grateful for her realistic perspective, but now I could see it for what it really was: sabotage disguised as protection. Mark and I also discovered that Emma had been having private conversations with several of our wedding guests, sharing her concerns about our relationship and marriage. She'd told my college friend Michelle that I was only marrying Mark for his family's money, which was absurd since the Rodriguezes were middle-class teachers, not wealthy. She'd told Mark's cousin that I'd been pressuring Mark to convert to Christianity and abandon his family's Catholic traditions, which was completely untrue. She was trying to isolate you, Mark's cousin explained when we asked him about it. She made it sound like you were this manipulative person who was going to change Mark and separate him from his family. I thought it was weird at the time, but she seemed so worried and sincere. The most damaging discovery came when we learned that Emma had been contacting Mark's ex-girlfriends on social media, ostensibly to learn more about his dating history so she could better support our relationship. What she was actually doing was gathering ammunition. Stories about past relationships that she could twist and use to create doubt and insecurity. She reached out to me about 6 months before your wedding, Mark's ex-girlfriend from college told us during a phone call. She said she wanted to make sure she understood what you needed in a partner so she could be supportive. I thought it was sweet that your sister cared so much, so I told her about some of the challenges we'd had in our relationship. What kind of challenges? Mark asked. Just normal stuff. How you sometimes got withdrawn when you were stressed, how you could be indecisive about big life choices. She seemed really interested in hearing about times when you'd struggled or made mistakes. Emma had taken these normal relationship insights and weaponized them, using them to plant seeds of doubt in my mind about Mark's character and commitment. She'd also shared them with our parents, painting a picture of Mark as someone who might not be reliable or emotionally mature enough for marriage. The scope of Emma's manipulation was breathtaking. She'd spent over a year systematically undermining my confidence, creating conflict between Mark and his family, and positioning herself as the wise, concerned sister who was just trying to protect everyone from making terrible mistakes. She'd turned my wedding day into a showcase for her manipulation, using the most important moment of my life as the stage for her cruelest revelation. As we compiled all this evidence, I felt a mix of emotions I'd never experienced before. There was grief for the sister. I'd thought I had anger at the extent of her betrayal and a burning desire for justice that surprised me with its intensity. Emma had calculated that I would be too hurt, too embarrassed, and too family-oriented to fight back effectively. She'd underestimated how much her actions would galvanize my resolve and unite Mark's family with me against her. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Our mother called me 3 weeks after the wedding, her voice tight with anger and disappointment. "Rachel, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, Mom." "What's wrong? Did you really tell Emma that you thought your father and I were too old and set in our ways to understand your relationship with Mark? Did you really say that you wished we would stop giving you advice because we don't understand modern relationships?" My heart sank. "Mom, I never said any of those things. Where did you hear that from Emma?" "She told me you were feeling frustrated with our involvement in the wedding planning and that you'd asked her to talk to us about backing off." "That's completely untrue. I loved having you involved in the planning. Emma was the one who kept taking over and making decisions without consulting me." There was a long pause. "Oh, honey, I think your sister has been lying to all of us." It was the confirmation I needed that Emma's manipulation extended far beyond just my relationship with Mark. She'd been working to create division throughout our entire family system, positioning herself as the reasonable mediator while actually being the source of all the conflict. She'd been playing a game that none of us had even realized we were part of, and she'd been winning because we'd all trusted her completely. But now that I understood the rules of her game, I was ready to start playing to win. Emma had taught me that family loyalty could be a weapon, and I was about to become very skilled in its use. Once I understood the full scope of Emma's deception, I realized that emotional confrontation wouldn't be enough. Emma was too skilled at manipulation, too good at making herself appear to be the victim or the voice of reason. If I wanted real justice, I needed to be strategic, methodical, and absolutely thorough in my approach. I needed to build an airtight case against her that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The first step was documenting everything we'd discovered. Mark and I created a detailed timeline of Emma's actions complete with dates, witnesses, and corroborating evidence. We saved screenshots of social media conversations, kept records of phone calls, and asked everyone who'd been affected by Emma's lies to write down their experiences in detail. It was painstaking work, but it was necessary if we wanted people to understand that this wasn't just a family squabble or wedding day drama. My parents were the most difficult people to convince, partly because they'd been dealing with Emma's manipulation for so long that they'd normalized her behavior. When I first tried to explain what had happened, my father dismissed it as sister rivalry and suggested that I was being overly sensitive about what was probably just a misunderstanding. "Dad, she didn't misunderstand anything," I said during a tense family dinner a month after the wedding. "She deliberately lied to Mark's parents about things I never said, and she lied to you and Mom about things Mark never said. This wasn't confusion or miscommunication. It was calculated." "Emma has always been protective of you," my mother said, though she sounded less certain than usual. "Maybe she was just trying to help in her own way. By stealing my car on my wedding day, by telling my in-laws that my husband didn't want to marry me, by convincing you that I thought you were too old to understand my relationship." I pulled out the folder of evidence we'd compiled. "I have documentation of everything, including conversations with people Emma contacted behind my back. This isn't protection. It's sabotage." Emma wasn't present for this conversation. She'd been conveniently busy with work whenever we'd tried to arrange family meetings. But her absence actually worked in my favor, because it allowed me to present the evidence without her there, to deflect, minimize, or reframe the narrative. The breakthrough came when my mother called Michelle, my college friend, to verify some of the claims I'd made about Emma's gossiping. Michelle didn't just confirm what Emma had said about me supposedly marrying Mark for money. She also revealed that Emma had been spreading rumors about me for years, including claims that I'd cheated on exams in college and that I'd only gotten my job at the library because I'd lied about my qualifications. "I never believed any of it," Michelle assured my mother, "but Emma was so convincing when she talked about being worried about Rachel's choices. She made it seem like she was sharing these concerns out of love." That conversation changed everything for my parents. They started remembering other incidents over the years where Emma had been the source of information that had made them doubt my judgment or character. They recalled times when Emma had reluctantly shared concerning things I'd supposedly said or done, always framing herself as the reluctant messenger who was only speaking up because she cared so much. "She's been doing this for years," my mother realized with horror. "All those times I thought she was just being a good sister, looking out for you, but she was actually trying to turn us against you." With my parents finally understanding the situation, we were able to approach Emma as a united family, but I knew that a simple confrontation wouldn't be enough. Emma was too skilled at manipulation to be swayed by emotional appeals or family pressure. I needed leverage that would force her to face real consequences for her actions. That leverage came from an unexpected source: Emma's job. During our investigation, Mark's cousin had mentioned that Emma had contacted him through LinkedIn, claiming she was doing research for a family project. This struck me as odd since Emma worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, and family research wasn't part of her job description. I decided to look into Emma's professional life more carefully, and what I found was deeply troubling. Emma had been using her company's resources and work time to conduct her personal campaign against me. She'd used the company's social media monitoring tools to research Mark's ex-girlfriends. She'd used work computers to create fake email accounts for contacting our wedding guests, and she'd even used the company's graphic design software to create false documents that she'd shown to various family members. Most damaging of all, Emma had been bad-mouthing her employer on social media, making disparaging comments about her boss and coworkers that violated the company's social media policy. She'd also been inflating her role and accomplishments on her professional profiles, claiming credit for projects she hadn't worked on and degrees she hadn't earned. "This is a gold mine," Mark said when I showed him what I'd discovered. "She's committed multiple violations of company policy and probably some forms of fraud as well. But how do we use this information without seeming vindictive? We don't have to use it directly," Mark pointed out. "We just have to make sure the right people become aware of it." It turned out that one of Mark's engineering colleagues had recently started dating someone who worked in HR at Emma's company. Through this connection, we were able to discreetly bring Emma's policy violations to the attention of her employer's human resources department. We didn't make accusations or demand action. We simply shared factual information about her misuse of company resources and her public statements about the company. While we waited to see how that situation would develop, I focused on building a coalition of people who'd been affected by Emma's behavior. This wasn't difficult, since Emma had left a trail of damaged relationships and confused family members over the years. Her high school best friend, her college roommate, several ex-boyfriends, and multiple family friends all had stories about times when Emma had created drama, spread rumors, or manipulated situations to her advantage. "I always wondered why my parents suddenly became so critical of my choice to study abroad," Emma's college roommate told me during a long phone conversation. "Now I realize Emma must have been feeding them negative information about the program and my academic performance. She convinced them I was making a huge mistake, and they almost made me come home early." The pattern was consistent across all of these relationships. Emma would identify someone who threatened her position or made her feel insecure, and then she would systematically work to undermine that person's relationships and opportunities. She was particularly skilled at targeting moments of vulnerability. Major life changes, important decisions, or special occasions when people were most susceptible to doubt and manipulation. Armed with all this information, I finally felt ready to confront Emma directly. But I didn't want it to be a private conversation where she could deny everything or twist my words. I wanted witnesses, I wanted accountability, and I wanted her to face the full scope of what she'd done to our family and our relationships. The opportunity came when Emma finally agreed to attend a family dinner to clear the air about the wedding situation. She probably thought she could charm her way out of trouble the way she always had before. But this time she was walking into a room full of people who finally understood exactly who she really was. I spent the week before that dinner making final preparations. I organized all the evidence into a clear chronological presentation. I confirmed that key witnesses would be available by phone if needed. And most importantly, I prepared myself emotionally for the moment when I would finally hold my sister accountable for years of manipulation and betrayal. Emma thought she was coming to a family dinner where she could smooth over some minor wedding drama. Instead, she was walking into a reckoning that would expose every lie she'd ever told and every relationship she'd ever damaged. The sister who had taught me that family loyalty could be weaponized was about to learn that I'd become a very good student of her own techniques. The family dinner was scheduled for a Sunday evening at my parents' house, just like dozens of family gatherings we'd had over the years. Emma arrived fashionably late, carrying a bouquet of flowers for our mother and wearing the bright, confident smile that had always been her armor against accountability. She hugged everyone warmly, complimented my mother's cooking, and settled into her usual spot at the dining room table, as if nothing had changed. "I'm so glad we're finally doing this," Emma said, reaching for the bread basket. "I've been worried about all the tension since the wedding. I think there's been some miscommunication that we really need to clear up." "You're right about that," I said, pulling out the folder I'd prepared. "There has definitely been some communication that needs to be addressed." Emma's smile faltered slightly when she saw the folder, but she recovered quickly. "Rachel, I hope you're not going to make this more dramatic than it needs to be. I know you were upset about the car situation, but I really was just trying to help." "Let's talk about help," I said, opening the folder and pulling out the timeline we'd created. "Let's talk about all the ways you've been helping our family over the years." For the next 30 minutes, I methodically walked through every piece of evidence we'd gathered. I read aloud the statements from Mark's parents about what Emma had told them at the wedding. I shared the conversations with mutual friends about the rumors Emma had spread. I presented the documentation of her lies to our parents and her manipulation of family relationships going back years. Emma tried to interrupt several times, offering explanations and justifications, but our father shut her down. "Let your sister finish," he said sternly. "You'll have a chance to respond when she's done." The most devastating moment came when I played a recording that Mark's ex-girlfriend had made of her phone conversation with Emma 6 months before our wedding. In the recording, Emma could be heard fishing for negative information about Mark and explicitly stating that she was trying to figure out if Rachel was making a mistake with the marriage. "That's taken out of context," Emma protested, but her voice was shaking now. "I was just being a protective sister. Protective of what I asked. Protective of your position as the center of attention, protective of your role as the family expert on everyone else's relationships." By the time I finished presenting the evidence, the room was completely silent, except for the sound of our mother crying quietly. Emma's confident facade had crumbled entirely, and she looked smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "I need you to understand something," I continued, looking directly at Emma. "This isn't about the car. This isn't about wedding day drama. This is about years of systematic manipulation and emotional abuse disguised as love and concern. You have consistently tried to sabotage my relationships, undermine my confidence, and turn my own family against me." "I never meant to hurt you," Emma whispered. "Everything I did was because I love you and I wanted to protect you." "No," I said firmly. "Everything you did was because you were threatened by the idea of me having a life that didn't revolve around you. You couldn't stand the thought of me being happy and independent, so you tried to destroy it." Our father leaned forward, his expression grave. "Emma, is what your sister is saying true? Did you deliberately lie to Mark's parents about things Rachel never said?" Emma looked around the table, searching for any sign of support or sympathy, but found none. Even our mother, who had always been Emma's biggest defender, was staring at her with disappointment and hurt. "I may have exaggerated some things," Emma admitted reluctantly, "but I really was concerned about the marriage. I thought Mark's family was pushing too fast, and I wanted to protect Rachel from making a mistake." "By stealing her car on her wedding day?" Mark asked, speaking for the first time since the confrontation had begun. "By telling my parents that I didn't want to marry her. I thought if everyone slowed down and really thought about things," Emma started. "You thought you could control everyone's lives," I interrupted. "You thought you could manipulate us all into doing what you wanted when you wanted it." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. Emma alternated between denying the allegations, minimizing her actions, and trying to reframe herself as the victim of my overreaction. But the evidence was overwhelming, and even Emma's considerable manipulation skills couldn't overcome the mountain of documentation and witness testimony we'd assembled. The real shock came when my phone rang during dessert. It was Mark's HR contact calling to inform us that Emma's employer had completed their investigation into her misuse of company resources. Emma had been terminated immediately, and the company was considering legal action for her fraudulent claims about her qualifications and her unauthorized use of proprietary software. "How did they find out about that?" Emma demanded, but I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. "The same way I found out about everything else," I said calmly. "By paying attention and asking questions. The same skills you taught me when you were gathering information to use against me." Emma's face went pale as she understood that her professional life had just collapsed along with her family relationships. She tried to blame me for ruining her career, but our parents were having none of it. "You ruined your own career," our father said coldly. "Just like you've been trying to ruin your sister's life. The consequences you're facing are the direct result of your own choices." The evening ended with Emma storming out of the house, but not before returning my car keys and offering a grudging apology that satisfied no one. Over the following weeks, the fallout continued. Emma struggled to find new employment, partly because word of her termination had spread within her professional network. Several family friends distanced themselves from her after learning about her manipulation tactics. Most satisfying of all, she found herself isolated from the family support system she'd always taken for granted. Mark's parents, meanwhile, went out of their way to reaffirm their love and acceptance of me. Maria started calling me every week just to chat, and Carlos insisted on teaching me basic car maintenance so I'd never have to depend on anyone else for transportation. They also shared their experiences with other family members, ensuring that everyone understood exactly what had happened and why Emma's version of events couldn't be trusted. The most unexpected consequence was how the experience brought Mark and me closer together. Having survived Emma's attempt to destroy our relationship, we felt stronger and more united than ever. We'd learned to trust each other completely and to recognize manipulation tactics that might threaten our bond in the future. As I reflect on this entire experience now, I'm struck by how much I learned about family loyalty and justice. Emma taught me that blood relationships don't automatically guarantee love or loyalty, and that sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who hurt us most deeply. But she also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and that I'm capable of standing up for myself when necessary. The sweet taste of justice wasn't just about Emma facing consequences for her actions, though that was certainly satisfying. The real justice was in reclaiming my own narrative, rebuilding the relationships she'd tried to destroy, and creating the strong, honest family bonds that she'd been preventing all along. Mark and I have been married for 2 years now, and we're expecting our first child in the spring. Emma has occasionally reached out through mutual friends, suggesting that enough time has passed for us to move on from our wedding day disagreement. But what happened wasn't a disagreement. It was a revelation about someone's true character, and that kind of knowledge can't be unknown. I've learned that real family isn't just about shared blood or history. It's about trust, respect, and genuine care for each other's happiness. Mark's parents have shown me more authentic family love in 3 years than Emma showed me in 28. And while I'll always grieve for the sister I thought I had, I'm grateful for the clarity that comes from finally understanding who she really is. The Honda Civic is still running perfectly, by the way. Every time I drive it, I'm reminded of the generosity of my real family and the strength I found to protect the relationships that matter most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about building a life so good that their attempts to destroy it only make you stronger. You know, sharing this story with all of you has been incredibly healing. Family betrayal cuts so deep because it violates our most basic assumptions about love and loyalty. But sometimes those betrayals teach us lessons we never could have learned any other way. Have you ever had someone in your family who seemed supportive, but was actually undermining you behind the scenes? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one, and your stories help me feel less alone in this experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama and justice stories. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that they're not crazy for questioning family members who claim to have their best interests at heart. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we can share our truth without judgment. Remember, you deserve family members who celebrate your happiness instead of trying to sabotage it, and sometimes the family you choose is more loyal than the family you're born into. Until next time, trust your instincts and protect your peace.